This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun beating Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Technical issues this morning, ready to roll on a Tuesday, second day of August in 2022. Welcome in. Thanks for being a part of the program. Glad to have you and looking forward to you keeping me straight throughout this 2-hour show, live streaming every Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And I'm not sure where to start exactly this morning. There are a couple of different places, right? And we come at this show from the South Carolina perspective. So let's start there. But I don't think that will dominate our conversation today because there's some national stuff out there that is just overwhelming. There is a college football discussion that I want to get into with you guys that is fascinating based off an article I just read from Dennis Dodd on CBSSports.com. But from the Gamecock perspective, how about Carolina baseball? Good news, and it could use all the good news you could possibly get. 3 of the 4 guys drafted coming back to Carolina baseball for the 2023 season. Didn't see this coming. You only had 4 guys drafted, round 15 or later. So that's the easy explanation, right? The money that these professional teams were offering Braylon Wimmer, Noah Hall, and company there. It was James Hicks is the other one. Just not good enough to convince them that now is the time to start their professional careers. Josiah Seitler was the other one. He got $125,000 for signing with the Pittsburgh Pirates and has moved on. Oddly enough, a guy who didn't get drafted, who decided to enter his name into the transfer portal, actually signed a professional contract yesterday with Colin Burgess, the catcher, moving to the Detroit Tigers organization. But getting back a couple of pitchers in Hicks and Hall, and then one of the most athletic guys that has come through the Gamecock baseball program in a while anyway, Braylon Wimmer. Good news. Good news in a big way, I think, for Mark Kingston and company, just to have some experience back, to have some proven production back, to have the perception of the program be that hey, guys aren't just trying to jet. With Julian Bosnick as well, a guy that hopped out of the program that you didn't quite see coming and that transferred within the SEC over to Texas A&M, I believe. So interesting Gamecock baseball news with 3 guys drafted, deciding to return for the 2023 season, which when I say that makes my brain hurt because that will be the spring season where we are right now. That's a great sign that I'm an old man. DC first in this morning on the YouTube live stream with a morning Tim. Anthony Harris with a good morning UFAs. We can always count on Anthony. Josh weighing in. And Jason, good morning to all of you guys on the YouTube live stream. Appreciate you hopping on. So good news from the Gamecock perspective on the baseball side of things. Major League Baseball, big news yesterday. Austin Riley with the Braves signing a 10-year, $212 million deal to stay in Atlanta. And you go through the list now, everything that Atlanta has for the next 5 years, wildly impressive. I mean, it basically includes just everybody that you would want to include. Maybe not Max Fried on that list, but everybody else. The Braves are showing why you don't go all in with a guy who has already put in such a tremendous, not even foundation, such a tremendous commitment now. tremendous, what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever Freddie Freeman was for the Braves, which was a ton, right? He had already done a ton, but he's also, I think, 29 or maybe even more than that. It doesn't make sense to then mortgage your future or offer up more than your franchise, than's good for your franchise, right? You got to still have some flexibility, man. You still need money to make other guys happy, to lock them up. You don't want to hamstring yourself there. And the Braves didn't go over their ceiling. They clearly had a limit. They hit it in the negotiations. Whether or not Freddie's agent actually told him about that last offer is up for debate still at this point, I think. But it would be very difficult to convince me, if you're a Braves fan, even at the peak, right? Freddie Freeman's holding up the World Series trophy. Dansby Swanson saying they better lock him up. If you told every Braves fan then, okay, you get Freddie Freeman for the next 5 years, 6 years, whatever. I think it was just a 5-year deal that the Braves were offering, and the Dodgers ended up going with 6, right? You get that, or you get these 7 guys locked up for the next 5 years. Which one do you take? It's not close, right? So kudos to the Braves for making a move there. 6 o'clock's today's trade deadline. I think officially the Braves getting an outfielder. Robbie Grossman, I believe, hadn't done much this year, I think, from the Tigers. And the Braves giving up a minor league pitcher for that. Also getting basically swapping relievers with the Houston Astros, giving away Will Smith, and a lot of Braves fans ready for him to move on. Thank you very much for the postseason performance last year in the World Series. That guy hasn't been that was the exception. He has not been the rule, unfortunately. So ready to move on from him. A lot of Braves fans been at that point. So that's the word in Major League Baseball. And again, going to get a qualified opinion in on this. Former Gamecock assistant Stuart Lake set to join us this morning, 8:30 as well, to talk maybe more specifics about these 3 guys coming back to Carolina baseball, turning down professional baseball, just basically delaying their careers a year. Talk about just Josiah Seitler going the other way, Colin Burgess moving on as well, a couple of guys that he coached in his tenure there with Mark Kingston as an assistant at Carolina baseball. But so we had a couple of $200 million plus contracts talked about yesterday. Austin Riley talked about in the best way possible, as the Tonester Roger also weighing in this morning. Morning to you guys. So that was kind of the best of sports, right? This is a guy who, I mean, has been on fire recently and didn't seem to squeeze every single cent off of a long-term deal, the richest in club history, by the way, but going to be massively comfortable and everything else, but lays just security for everybody involved, right? Austin Riley is obviously in really good shape, but so are the Braves. And this is what I love in sports, right? When we can associate guys with teams. Cal Ripken Jr. is an Oriole. Chipper Jones is a Brave. Brett Favre was a Packer, and then it got messy after that, right? I don't know. I probably shouldn't have flipped that one real quick. The football version of that, I don't know if it exists unless you cut your career short. Andrew Luck was a Colt. Trying to think. Nope, can't do it with Montana. Can't do it with Peyton Manning. Can't do it with Tom Brady. Russell Wilson is an example of that here this past offseason. So I don't know if there's a football version, a franchise quarterback version. There is one in you guys' mind. Let me know. Yeah, Mike Soroka. I don't think we know at this point where he's at. Getting Kirby Yates is where Josh is all in. He's all in the negotiations right now, all about the trade deadline. All right, Josh. Appreciate that. I guess my question then for you, since you're clearly in on this thing, how do you feel about the Austin Riley deal? I don't know how you can feel anything but really, really good and really appreciative, grateful for the front office that Atlanta has going right now. John Elway, good example. Again, you had to go back, right? and rode off into the sunset back in the day. Took a while. Josh says, love it. He loves it, what the Braves are doing. I don't know how you can't. Watched episode 3 and 4 of The Captain last night, that Derek Jeter documentary. Again, made me see how important the front office is in professional sports in general, but especially from a baseball standpoint. And I know Atlanta's gotten some criticism, especially after the Freddie Freeman deal. But clearly, the big picture, doing things, setting the franchise up. I think they have the 5th best record in the big leagues right now, still 3.5 games back of the Mets in the East, but setting themselves up for sustained success. And man, can you ask for anything else as a fan? As a fan of your professional team, I think it's the ultimate compliment when you can see your front office setting your franchise up for sustained success, getting guys, developing guys, first of all, young guys, into giving them the chance, and then they become stars, and then not waiting, not getting themselves into contract issues and locking those guys up. Because we all know there's a ton of money, and it's hard for us. It's impossible for me to identify with a $212 million deal. What we were talking about, Deebo Samuel yesterday, $73.5 million deal, I think, if he maxes it out. 58 guaranteed, something like that. Those numbers boggle my mind. I can't identify. But you got the Braves on one side, I think, doing an ideal scenario, in the ideal scenario. And yesterday we saw the opposite of that playing out as well. All kind of, call it whatever you want to, right? Moral outrage, fake outrage, blowback from the Deshaun Watson suspension. $230 million, richest in NFL history, and it's 6 games. And compared to other suspensions, I'm guessing you guys saw the same social media posts that I did, right? A lot of guys suspended for marijuana longer than Deshaun Watson suspended yesterday. I guess the NFL still has a little time to see if they're going to appeal. But they were pushing for the year. My overall takeaway, and also that the Browns had structured the deal for this season to be $1 million salary of that $230 million deal, knowing that something was coming down. So the 6 games is going to cost Deshaun Watson $300,000 because they knew this was coming. But man, the optics of that thing, just brutal yesterday. And the NFL had to see it coming. The Cleveland Browns had to see it coming. I saw the Haslams, the owners there for Cleveland, release a statement saying they back Deshaun and they know he's going to do things that he has to do and that he feels bad and is. I just read it and was like, I guess that's what you do. But I guess my overall takeaway from yesterday was reading these comparisons of what Deshaun Watson was accused of doing, what other guys had been busted for, seeing the difference. And then ultimately what I came to is like, okay, what would have satisfied you? What is the morally appropriate punishment for this situation? I don't know. To think that I don't understand that thinking, that you get to the place of, hey, I know exactly what should happen here, and it should be that's where, especially social media, comes off to me as just being complaining or that fake outrage stuff. Like and it's kind of like the NIL conversation in college sports, right? I've said it way too many times on this show, and I hate saying it, right? Well, I don't know what the appropriate thing to do from a guardrail standpoint or how you stop it, but I know they got to do something. Well, I should probably figure something out concrete or stop complaining about it. To me, it's the same thing here. To say, well, I mean, do you ban the guy? Were you looking for a lifetime ban from football? Because, I mean, if you're going down that route, if in your mind the absolute worst happened to the absolute maximum of women in these situations, then I could see that, right? I mean, how could you allow someone like that to play football at all? That's where I felt like that's what I feel like those that are complaining about the length of a suspension almost are coming from. That's the place. That I don't know how you get anywhere else logically. I mean, otherwise, are you saying 8 games would have made you feel better? 12 a year? I don't get it. The conversation we had on the show yesterday, and it was with a Browns fan in Stuart Lake, was awful situation. It will be good as football fans to move on from the situation, and at least there's a resolution. And I don't think we can ignore that he didn't play at all last year. That's it. So that's where I am on that. Like, I thought about it. Like, should I be feeling stronger about this? Should I be standing up and calling out the NFL for being hypocritical or not holding their players accountable at a higher level? But I just think in this situation, because there is no criminal case, the civil cases have been, it looks like, all the way through. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's a new headline every single day with more cases being settled. Those have been worked out. And then the other side of me is, well, what money just makes this okay? No, none of this makes it okay. The fact that the judge who made this ruling went out of her way to say, I know this is an unprecedented thing. I think typically the punishment is the judge in this case can only, by NFL rule, go with suspension and fine, right? And he hasn't been fined at all in the 6-game suspension. But this judge went out of her way to say no more massages for Deshaun Watson, other than, I guess, those who are attached to the organization, to keep anything from happening again. And that's kind of damning in a lot of ways as well, right? I mean, I didn't make me feel any better about the situation. But at least everything that has been swirling around for so long now, I'm talking about a year plus. This time last year, I was thinking Deshaun Watson is going to be a Carolina Panther. The Panthers need a quarterback. And Deshaun Watson fits the bill in so many ways. And then this came up. And I think so many organizations rightly said, I don't want any part of that. And then he didn't play football at all last year. The Panthers had to go with Sam Darnold, and now they've got Darnold and Baker Mayfield. Here we are. So that's my take. Those are my thoughts, some of my thoughts about what happened yesterday. Again, we'll talk to Stuart coming up in a little bit. And I don't think he's a guy that harps on this. And as Browns fans, I get it. You kind of, it's got to be really weird, right? And I saw he was at practice yesterday and getting mobbed for autographs and the whole thing. Like that's when it gets really ugly, that because you're a fan of a team, then you're now linked to almost the other side of this terrible story, where it's like you're supporting the person who was clearly in the wrong to some degree. That's what the NFL found yesterday, right? It was not what Deshaun Watson has been telling us, that he didn't do anything wrong. It's not that. I guess where I'm still at in my mind was to what degree, right? And if the police investigation doesn't determine it's on a criminally prosecutorial, is that a word? Where you can be prosecuted criminally, charged criminally, well, then it makes sense that the NFL also doesn't come to the conclusion that you deserve the ultimate penalty. But at the same time, man, I will not be watching Deshaun Watson the same. No, I don't think any of us will be watching Deshaun Watson the same. Certainly not how I watched him in college with the first time he played Carolina on the torn ACL and just marveled at the guy, and seem to always step up in the biggest moments and the national championships and the whole thing. And then the story with he and his mom and living in a Habitat for Humanity house. That entire reputation image is gone for, I think, all of us. And that, I guess that's the main problem I would have in this situation if someone is on that end of the spectrum. But I don't think any of us are. And I think that's where we get it wrong, right? Well, that's where the social media name calling and pointing and arguing and writing all caps and spending way too much time on there going back and forth with somebody, that's not real, because that's just typing on a computer and what you read, and then you come to your own conclusions instead of seeing the person who's trying to formulate these thoughts. So what I'm trying to say is I don't think anybody is standing up and saying, yay for Deshaun Watson. Good for him. I don't think anybody could say that out of this, man. I'm certainly not saying that. I get it where if you want to go even further than that and say the NFL is absolutely corrupt, that they could allow this situation to happen, a guy in this situation to sign a $230 million contract. Well, that's a Cleveland Browns issue, right? And then it's more of a football issue. An organization that has been at the bottom of professional sports, willing to gamble on personal issues more than other organizations. That's something that the Browns are going to have to deal with. And, man, I wouldn't want it for my organization. I was especially coming off the Jerry Richardson mess. The Carolina Panthers, that would have been the worst move possible. I mean, they're in shady shape enough as it is with the David Tepper and the training facility and the quarterback situation, the head coach situation with Matt Rule's run. I mean, can you imagine Deshaun Watson being in the mix? How would Panthers fans feel about this, right? Feel like you might have Clemson Panthers fans more supportive of Deshaun Watson, and then you have guys that he whipped, the North Carolina or the other ACC portion of the Carolina Panthers fan base, and then obviously the Gamecock portion as well, saying, no, this is not working, and almost further drive a wedge into the Panthers fan base, which is the last thing you need. So just to have Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield battling out right now in training camp, I think is a tremendous breath of fresh air there. To have J.C. Horn back at Panthers camp yesterday, that had been tremendously alarming. I know they said it was just some soreness in his surgically repaired foot in his first day at camp, I think it was. And they put him on the physically unable to perform list, but they took him off of that yesterday. He's back. They said it was just some soreness, not a big deal. And to see him back at training camp so quickly, a great sign for the Carolina Panthers yesterday. And hopeful that the conversation for those of us who like to talk sports can get back to just sports when it comes to Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns moving forward, but knowing the severity of the situation, that any kind of accusation of sexual misconduct is not anything to be taken lightly. I get where the conversation has been, can't shy away from it, has to be discussed. Just a lot of mixed emotions, I guess, or perspectives going into the news yesterday, now that we've had about 24 hours to digest it. Those are the thoughts on the Deshaun Watson suspension. Again, good news for the Panthers that J.C. Horn, the former Gamecock, back at Panthers camp. I did find it interesting to hear Rick Sanford's comments about J.C. Horn. He said he talked to him a little bit, and being the first round draft pick for the Gamecocks, being a former defensive back in the NFL, I'm sure feels a bit of a kinship with Horn, even though it's a few decades apart. But just saying that it seems stuck on a bad team right now. Well, the Panthers defense wasn't bad last year. It doesn't project to be bad again this year. It's just that they got to get some help, man. They got to get a quarterback who can make plays and the whole deal. So that's where we are from a football standpoint this Friday. Preseason camp kicking off for the Gamecocks. We keep moving closer and closer and closer, which is all a great sign for sure. Speaking of closer, we're getting real close to adding our first guest in on the program, like it's going to happen right now. Stuart Lake, former Gamecock baseball assistant coach, joining us from, we calling it officially Little Mountain. Is that correct?
Yeah, Little Mountain, definitely.
Whoa, I got no clue what the hat is today, which is part of the allure. You knew that was going to happen. That's why you're going with it. I see the smile. I see what you're doing there. Help me out. What do you got?
Well, I've got the USC Sakahatchee baseball hat. So as Coach Joy gave me one late this summer, I had saved it for you to break out. I figured it might be a good time here in the middle of the week.
Well done.
Yeah, I like it. What do you think?
Fantastic. It's got an old Washington Redskins feel to it. What's the mascot there at Sakahatchee?
They're still the Indians. So it's actually where I attended junior college way back when. So when he kind of found out about it, he gave me a hat as we were kind of playing around this summer at one of the tournaments. So, I played at USC Sakahatchee in 1991.
I got to hear some stories about that because I still don't know where Sakahatchee – I can't even say it, Sakahatchee. Where is it, first of all? How did that come about, second of all?
It's in Allendale, South Carolina, which you probably haven't gone through too many times. I guess you could on your way to Beaufort or Hilton Head, Savannah, that type of stuff. So it's at the very bottom of our state. But no, I transferred there. I transferred the old-fashioned way. I academically couldn't hardly go back my second year. So I had gone to Newberry College as a freshman, did not take care of a lot of my academics, and baseball-wise, thought it might be a good move to do junior college, which turned out to be a great decision in life. Got to enjoy a good year there, played for a guy, Coach Joe Baxter, and then transferred on to Charleston Southern. So big part of my career, got to meet a lot of great people, and proud I was able to go there.
I'm glad you went through your personal career because that gives you even more a qualified opinion on the Gamecock news from yesterday with 3 of the 4 guys who got drafted this year. James Hicks, a pitcher, Noah Hall, a pitcher, and then Braylon Wimmer, a guy that I know you coached pretty close from a hitting standpoint for several years, all deciding to turn down that leverage that they had and then come back to the Gamecock baseball program. What'd you make of that?
Yeah, super excited for the program. I don't know James Hicks as well. He was a pitcher that got recruited in kind of after I had left the program. But Noah Hall was a guy that I got to be there when Coach Meade and I were both on his official visit with him, and just think the world of him. I think both are huge for them on the mound. I think they've setting themselves up with a pretty good pitching staff. And when you get a guy to come back like Noah, who was really the heart and soul with Sanders last year, that pitching staff, and then everything that I had saw in Hicks and heard about him, obviously got hurt really early in the season, so you didn't get to see a lot of him. But I thought that's going to be big. And then to get a Braylon Wimmer back, I mean, the guy's played pretty much every game since he's been here. So you're looking at I don't know where he'll be in their lineup, but you feel like a middle-of-the-order type guy to come back. I was actually a little surprised because those guys are at that point in their career. A lot of times they kind of jump on it, to go ahead and get that pro career started, get a little bit of money. So I think it says a lot about them wanting to come back and be Gamecocks again.
Well, Hicks was taken in the 15th round, as was Josiah Seitler. And we know Seitler signed for $125,000 just to give some numbers out there. Wimmer was an 18th round pick. Hall was in the 20th round pick as well. So I guess my question is, I got several questions coming off this thing, but you think name, image, and likeness plays into this at all? Because like you mentioned, this is the year that you got the leverage. This is the time that you can get more than $1,000 to sign and basically a plane ticket and go, because you have other options.
Yeah, I would assume it did. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure how much baseball right now is using it here. I know it's all over the SEC, so I would assume it is here. But at the same time, probably still couldn't even match that 125 in NIL money. So I think a lot of times that NIL money makes you feel better about your decision to stay instead of maybe matching it financially. And sometimes you just want to prove a little more. I know with Hicks and Hall, they probably got at least 2 more years of eligibility left. So they feel like maybe 1 more year next year where they'll still have a little bit of leverage. And then Braylon Wimmer, I get confused too with COVID. I try to always go back. Was he here then? Yeah, okay, he was. So he's got 1 more year. So in Wimmer's case, he probably has 2 more as well, or 1 more after this one. So again, NIL money makes you feel better about your decision. I'm sure that they're involved in it because you have to give it to your current players. You can't. And that's the one thing about the NIL money, and I guess we all kind of chuckle when we hear it. You can't use it to induce a player to come to school, but you can certainly give it to the guys that are in your program, and those would have been 3 guys that you certainly think that would be getting some through the program.
Yeah, Pittsburgh coach Pat Narduzzi having a lot to say about that and just calling it for what it is when he had the best receiver in the country last year and transfers over to Southern Cal. He obviously knows there were offers out there. It's pay for play. That's just where we are. Again, I mentioned a little bit earlier, I don't have the answer. I don't know. I haven't heard anybody who has the answer to keep that from happening. So I'm not going to continue to rail on that today, especially. From a baseball standpoint, how is Braylon Wimmer different than Whit Merrifield? A couple of guys who early on in their career played the outfield at Carolina, but athletic enough and good players enough to move to the infield, to me, seem very similar type players. Clearly, Whit moved on after 3 years and slugged through a long minor league career, and obviously has parlayed that into being an all-star and a kind of a mainstay with the Kansas City Royals. What did I see? He hit some kind of number the other day. Was it 1,000 career hits, maybe 1,500? I forget what it is. I mean, he just keeps hitting and hitting and hitting. To me, they're similar type guys. Obviously, from a big league projection or a pro ball projection, not quite the same from a draft standpoint.
Yeah, there was just 1,000 hits in the big leagues, I believe is what it was. And
amazing.
No, they're both, they're very close to 5-tool players. And that's a big statement to say. So I don't say that just, I used to run camps all the time through my career, and I would ask those young kids, I'd explain what the 5 tools are, which first of all, they're hit for average, hit for power. Then it's speed, it's your fielding, and it's your throwing. Those would be the 5. So I would say, all right, name a major leaguer who's a 5-tool player. And they'd all scream out Mike Trout, which is true. Then it would go quiet. And I'd say, okay, who's next? And occasionally another name would get yelled out, but it wasn't, in unison like a Mike Trout. So that tells you here we are talking about big leaguers. And there are very few guys that you say is a 5-tool player, but those guys are very close to it because they can both hit obviously for average, and they've both shown at times in their cut. Now we're talking college. Obviously, Whit has taken it to a different level than Wimmer's been able to so far. But the biggest difference between them, Whit didn't swing and miss, and at times Wimmer will. We've all seen that. But he still has that ability to hit for an average, even though he does strike out more than Whit. But then the other tools come in. They can both run. They can both field, and they can both throw. To say that you started in the outfield in the SEC, then started in the infield in the SEC, that's a huge statement. And to be able to do it and people almost forget that you did the other one because you're doing so well at it. I mean, to think that Whit was that outfielder who became the infielder. Now, if you knew him as a major leaguer, you go, oh, yeah, he's an infielder. So he has that type potential. The draft, respected him a little bit this year, but probably felt like I could have been better than this. And I thought he may have been. I thought I might see him sneak in that 9 or 10 round, which would have left those clubs with a little more room to offer more money.
Sure.
But, he got drafted where he did, and he's coming back with a little chip on his shoulder, I think, to prove, hey, I'm a little better than that.
And just for some perspective, it has worked out well for a few guys who have turned down professional opportunities, come back to Carolina. The ones that stand out to me, Stuart, feel free to add to this. Sam Dyson, remember his press conference? Never forget it. It was him and Nick Ebert who had decided to come back to school, and that was before the first national championship season back in 2010. And way before then, it was Landon Powell decided to turn down a really seemed like at the time a good opportunity and came back for his senior season as well. That was the third Gamecock College World Series run of those 3 in a row back in 2, 3, and 4, I believe. Or it might I think that was right.
Yeah, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So those are a couple of guys, but man, that's kind of few and far between. These are guys going kind of the road less traveled from the baseball standpoint. Any other examples that popped up in your mind of guys who turned down the pro ball deal, come back for a year, and it really does pay off in a professional baseball career?
Well, I'm trying to think of some names, but where you usually see that happen is if a guy had redshirted, say had got an injury early in his career and is coming back. Sometimes that'll be the big kicker, but to be honest, even in the SEC with most of my guys, they've signed. And you sign because of what you said. I mean, this year, yeah, you can get, let's just say 150,000. Well, next year you may get 10,000. And a lot of times you'll hear them say they pay for school. That helps them out, that you can put in your contract that their organization, basically Major League Baseball, will pay for X number of semesters of school once you leave. So that kind of takes that burden also off of you. You got to remember, most baseball guys aren't on full scholarships. So their parents are trying to figure out every year, how am I paying for, tuition, room, board, different things too. So it's a lot of times it's a financial issue that club will say, hey, we'll give you, we're saying 150,000, but we'll also give you 4 more semesters of school, which we'll pay for. So you throw that in too, which helps that family go, okay, now we don't have to worry about that. So there's a lot of variables. I feel like each time somebody comes back, they have a great reason, I hope, in their heart, because if not, and I've always said this to players, please don't come back and, either in October or April when you're kind of in the middle of everything, go, man, I should have signed. Because if you do, no one wants to hear that. No teammate wants to hear it. No coach wants to hear it. Once you decide, like they did yesterday, hey, I'm not going, then move on quickly. And that's what, and I've seen a lot of guys be able to do that well, but the few that don't, it can burden you that next year. So you have to mentally get yourself ready too.
I think Michael Roth, another name to maybe throw in there. I believe he was drafted after his junior year. Might have turned that down and come back for a senior year. And I want to get to the guys who have moved on as well. I know Josiah Seitler is extra special to you. Colin Burgess also kind of an exception to the rule yesterday for sure. But first, I'm fascinated in kind of the behind the scenes from the coaching standpoint, the roster management standpoint, because this wasn't talked about that much, I feel like, publicly. But from a baseball standpoint, you just recruit differently. Right, you always have. You have to foresee guys coming to your program, the ultra talented ones especially, for 3 years, and then you almost want them to get drafted because that means they played well, right? And you gotta be able to recruit to make sure you can fill that hole, be ready for it. So I would imagine, you tell me, Stuart, that Mark Kingston and company were prepared or assuming, kind of had to set their minds to the fact that these guys were gone to professional baseball. If they come back, that's gravy, but you got to make sure that they're not leaving your roster with with massive holes there. You tell me, how do you think that this was kind of approached from a roster management standpoint, and now how do you adjust things moving forward?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it's a weird dynamic in it and it goes all the way up till August 1st. So, I mean, you think these guys are going to probably be sitting in a classroom within the next 3 weeks. So you've got very little time to maybe sometimes adjust your scholarships. And that's what sometimes will happen. You end up calling another kid on the team and go, hey, I know we were promising you 40% scholarship this year, and we'll just use, Wimmer's came back. Is there any way we can drop you to 25%, which is as low as you can still go? And we'll make you up that 15 next year, plus we'll give you another 10%. I mean, it turns into bargaining with a family going, okay, that means we'll pay, $2,300 more to go to school next year, but you're telling me you're going to give me that plus more back the following year. So it is the next week or two sometimes is just your mind, you lose it because you're trying to keep up with who you're trying to help here and who you're trying to bring in there. And, don't ever forget, too, the baseball thing is, and Carlos Cortez was a guy who left a few years ago after only 2 years, because if you're 21 going into your draft sophomore year, you're eligible.
Right.
So a lot of the guys that are, staying back, which is very popular right now, to stay back a year early in your high school career, in middle school,
sure,
so that you're graduating at 19 and only needing 2 years. It's just so many variables to baseball that honestly the other sports don't have. Football, you're not selling your amount of money. Baseball, we were still always worried if we were recruiting a guy against Clemson, yeah, we were wanting to match our programs, but at the same time, we're like, well, what did they offer you? And very few people will tell you, hey, well, they offered me 60%. So you're always trying to figure out where in the other sports like football and basketball, well, you're getting a full scholarship. So you really get to just sell your program and what we can do for you, where in baseball, you're still trying to bargain against that guy that goes, well, the College of Charleston just offered me 75%. And now you're offering me 30%. Does that mean they like me twice as much? Or, so it's just such weird dynamics in recruiting for college baseball.
And you've never done it with name, image, and likeness involved. So as you were talking about that, it only makes sense to me. This has to help Mark Kingston right now, other college baseball coaches, doesn't it? To have the flexibility to say, hey, you guys coming back, you made this much from a scholarship standpoint last year. I would assume now he doesn't necessarily have to take that from his 11.7, that maybe they can get that from an NIL standpoint, or when you had to call those other guys previously, I would think right now they'd say, hey, no, you're not dropping me from 40 to 25%. Just find them a deal, man. Go get them paid some other way, or get me paid some other way, or something. There has to be more flexibility now than there's ever been for college baseball coaches, I would think, from that money standpoint, even though it's not supposed to be tied to pay for play. But like you mentioned, with these guys in the program, now you can, having already been in the program, you can help, the school can help them get those name, image, and likeness deals, right?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely different. I've never gone through it, and it's really the first summer that coaches have gone through it. I've listened to a lot of them I've seen on the road, and you hear crazy numbers. I mean, to think that guys are possibly getting $150,000 in baseball, name, image, and likeness, and probably more when it all comes out to it. I mean, you just hear stories that are basically people calling other programs saying, hey, if you can get me, $150, I'll transfer to you. And, of course, those conversations never happened. But then they end up at those programs and they're getting it name, image, likeness for that amount. So it's a different world. I don't think anyone knows which way it's going. Then it's going to be interesting I know how competitive baseball people are. It's going to be interesting to see. I can't imagine you haven't heard yet of just every team hiring a guy just to go out and raise them money. I mean, I know right now, I think that still goes through your Gamecock clubs or whatever, you are. But at some point, you're going to think there's just one coach who I don't even know if you call him coach. That may be all he is doing, is being your name, image, and likeness guy and have his office that deals with it. I mean, you're going to have to. I'm sure football's already doing that in some aspect, but it's just and as they say, I don't see it going back. I don't see, student athletes in 2 years going, hey, this isn't right. We shouldn't be able to get this money, or so it's not going back. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes forward, especially just in baseball. We're different than football and basketball in a sense. So it'll be interesting to see how it progresses.
Look, I would have never thought that Gamecock football, Gamecock basketball, and now Gamecock baseball specifically would have been immediately impacted by the idea of name, image, and likeness and benefit from it. From where I sit anyway, when you get Spencer Rattler, when you get Gigi Jackson, when you got 3 guys who were drafted come back to a program, it seems to be like, if you're talking about the haves and have-nots, like Nick Saban has talked about, he's like, Alabama's fine. I'm not worried about Alabama. I'm worried about the sanctity of college sports, which I think everybody rolls their eyes when Nick Saban starts talking about that, right? But to see it specifically play out right in front of us to seem like it has a positive impact, I didn't see that coming, and it is really interesting. I think it just goes to the evidence side of things spreading out from a parity standpoint in college sports as opposed to condensing. Maybe the baseball argument's a little different because so few programs, I think, probably in the country, Stuart, can compete at a high level when it comes to money, and the SEC LSU certainly seems to be far and away, maybe Texas A&M out there. It goes to, again, I'll mention Pat Narduzzi's comments, the Pitt football coach, talking about boosters right now are deciding to just go to name, image, likeness deals instead of donating to the athletic department. And it should be the old school way of giving their money to the athletic department and going from there. Yeah, I don't think the Gamecock club specifically, like, it's now a different deal, maybe a collective, and that's just the way it's going to move forward. What would the title be for someone in charge of that? What, baseball outreach or something like that, right? I think you got to have somebody that's on staff and has their thumb on it and is seen to be the guy to go to make sure this thing is running how you want to run it, don't you?
I do. And how could any of us in college baseball be shocked that LSU is at the forefront of – I mean, they've been at the forefront of this, it seems, the whole time. You'd expect in our world, Mississippi State, and they're doing very well, NIL. And now South Carolina, I mean, you look at the programs that take baseball serious, and those are the programs. Ole Miss is doing very well, and then throw on a national championship, they're already doing well with their support. So what it's going to do is those teams like a Pitt or conferences that already were struggling to keep up, because a fan base is supporting, and the separation is going to get very wide. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But yeah, it's interesting, and it's exciting to me a little bit to see where will this go? Where will it go? And again, because of social media, here we are sitting, I'm in my house and you're at yours. I mean, just think how easy it is to connect now in this world. It certainly ain't going to go backwards on where you can reach out to people and then want to be involved. Why would a donor who has $1 million to donate, why would they not want to be personally connected at times to that player or players? So I can imagine the athletic departments are really going to find the struggle to say, hey, no, give it to us so we can spread it out across everything. I want to be connected. Everyone loves to know a guy, or know a girl. So they're going to want to have that for them. So it's a different world, and it changed. It seems to have changed so quickly from what we used to hear, and you kind of go, that's a long way off from happening. Now everything happens fast, and I think we'll see baseball changing. In our world, they're saying there'll probably be 18 scholarships within the next year. Instead of 11.7, it'll be unlimited coaches. So thank God we may never have to say the word volunteer again to coaches, but you could have staffs of 6 or 8 people, even in college baseball. And that's where it's going, because all the other sports want that too. So it's an interesting time, to say the least.
Man, from where I sit, being a big-time college baseball fan, especially covered the SEC. I know the SEC has dominated college baseball by and large. You see half the field of the College World Series this year, not counting Texas and Oklahoma, and you're talking about making it even less fair or more unbalanced moving forward. But the idea that talented players will have more reason to stick around longer in college baseball, it's fantastic. I mean, what happened at Tennessee this year, I think, was great for baseball in general. Just to see those scenes, it was absolutely ridiculous. But to have the personality, to have the postseason scene in Knoxville, I thought it was great. I love watching it. I want to see that happen at more and more schools where maybe it hasn't happened. To allow fans to go on those journeys, I think is great. And then to just keep the talent in college baseball. I guess from my standpoint, Stuart, I don't know about yours, I see guys having better experiences for longer as opposed to having to feel like they need to get in pro baseball as soon as they can. And then, man, that minor league slog is difficult in so many ways and always has been. I think it's getting a little bit better, but the idea that it's going to be such a more improved path maybe to the big leagues for so many guys, that's good. That's a good thing, man.
Yeah, Major League Baseball, or I guess minor league baseball, tried to realize now with the housing, they're trying to help. But they're going to have to because of what you've already said. In the past, we had nothing to keep you here. So when I sat down with you and said to him, hey, man, come back next year, and you would say, well, can I get more scholarship? I don't know. Maybe I can get a little bit more. Maybe I can get you 10% more. Well, and on top of that, you were looking at money. Now I can say, like you said, hey, I can get you $60,000 that you can directly put in your bank account. Y'all do whatever you got to do, these obligations to get it. And, and you get to be here. It's hard to always joke with professional scouts. Why would you leave, especially the SEC, to go to minor league baseball unless you got a really good feeling you can move on up through it? Like the Share kid from Auburn, he started out AA. So, I mean, that's a different world of why he left to go do that. And I think I think you will see guys staying in college baseball. And speaking of Auburn, I don't know if you saw this one yesterday. I didn't realize Tim Hudson had stepped away at Auburn. As their pitching coach. It came across yesterday on something that Tim Hudson decided to step away, and they hired Darren Schoenrock, who was the old Memphis coach for a long time, but was at Mississippi State. So it was just interesting to me to see a guy who was a pro guy step away from the college game because they had a lot of success with him at Auburn.
No doubt.
But, I'd love to know what's going on there with him to have done that too. It might have been a case of, he may be going into pro baseball. I don't know, but I think it's going to be different ways to keep people. It's going to be different ways once they get in school. You should see guys getting to school, but at the same time, Major League Baseball, they're putting a lot more money. Those first rounders, we used to think it was a big deal to get $1 million or to get $2 million. And then you look at Holiday getting to be the first pick, and he got $8 million. So, I mean, Major League Baseball certainly up their ante, too, to get the guys they really want.
Yeah, you mentioned a different path. That's what Colin Burgess certainly did, right?
Yeah.
Been a really, really good, especially defensive catcher for the Gamecocks the last several years. I think Gamecock fans were highly concerned to see his name pop up in the transfer portal and say, hey, what's going on there? You got Bosnick popping in as well. And then to see that he's not staying in college baseball, he's doing the exact opposite of what these other three guys did. He is not transferring to another school. He just signed with the Detroit Tigers without even getting drafted. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I'm excited for him. Obviously, I was sad to see him go too. He was a guy I got to be a part of recruiting. I got to coach him for 2 years, and I just knew his toughness and what he had played through a lot of times injury-wise. And it was cool for me that the Tigers, 2 of their scouts are former players of mine. And when this kind of started going down, they called me to not ask if he's good enough. They make those decisions. They're like, hey, we're not around him a lot. What do you think? And I loved coaching him. He was a guy that his dad's an old former hockey player. And if you've ever thought you'd know what a son of an old hockey player would be like. Well, that's what Burgess was like. I mean, just a guy that, you know, showed up every day. And I joke with him, there were days he let you know what he was going through, getting beat up. And you just have to say, okay, Burgess, I get it. I called in college too. Let's move on. And he would laugh and we'd move on. And I was just super excited to see him as a fan of the Tigers. You know, I was a big 80s kid, so I loved the Tigers in the 80s. So that was my, you know, Magnum had it too. So I probably had a little influence from that, but I've always liked the Detroit Tigers. And then Bosnick was a guy that I really wasn't sure what was going on. You know, he's a guy that kind of had made his decision to move from here early, had not stayed in touch with him as much, but to see him sign with the Pirates, so I assume he and Josiah are somewhere across paths down in that, you know, A-ball or at the facility or whatever. So I'm happy for him. I think a lot of times what you've seen and we're seeing is a lot of kids are using transferring or going to another school as leverage on those pro teams too. That, you know, hey, I've already made a decision to leave South Carolina. I've committed to Arkansas, so I'll go to Arkansas. So even the pro scouts are dealing with a different animal than they had in the past, you know, and especially in this era of where they all got that year back. So that's where I've had a few scouts say to me, boy, I'll be glad when those COVID guys are done, because they keep having that one more year of eligibility. Now, what scouts use on them now is age. You know, I've already had some say, well, he's got another year, but shoot, I don't like 23-year-olds. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to draft 21-year-olds. So that part is still going on, but I'll follow all three of those guys. It's exciting when guys get to go to that next level, and they all three went about it in a different way. And so we'll be following them for sure.
So Burgess, Bosnick, and Seitler. Seitler signing for $125,000. So the Pirates put he and Bosnick up there. You see it. He released a statement as well, just thanking everybody in the South Carolina program. And I know you put something out on social media as well. I thought that was your message was interesting for people who don't think there are kind of old school players. He's a great example of a guy who does have that mentality.
He is, and he was all about the program. You know, you and I talked, and I know we'll talk a little bit about how Derek Jeter was that guy he wanted to be a Yankee. Well, Josiah Seitler wanted to be a Gamecock. As he was coming out of high school, if he doesn't get hurt, he's probably one of the highest drafted kids that year in the draft from our state, possibly a second or third round type guy, which would have meant he don't come to school. So he would always, instead of complaining that he got hurt, he hurt his non-throwing shoulder like diving for a ball and tore his labrum. So he had to have a major surgery, didn't get drafted. And instead of always complaining that he got screwed out of money or draft, he would always say, it was a blessing. I got to be a Gamecock. This is what I really wanted to be anyway growing up, one of 11 brothers and sisters. He said, this is what I wanted to do. So he made you excited every day about him. And Coach Billy Anderson's a strength coach. We call Seitler his assistant because Seitler was in the weight room all the time. To look at Seitler's body now as compared to 4 years ago, it's tremendous. And I know we all like to wink and say, well, he got there a shortcut when we see a guy with a really athletic body. Well, let me tell you on him, there wasn't no shortcuts. That dude was lifting weights 4 or 5 times a week, coming in early before class or staying after practice to get a lift in because he was convinced, as we were, the stronger you are, the better chance you have in the SEC of competing. And that's been one of my little quotes. I always tell, I said to my son, his friends, I've said to players I've coached, at no point in your life as a man are you going to wake up and go, God, I wish I wasn't so strong. You're never going to say that. So don't be afraid to get in the weight room and get stronger on days you don't feel good. At least do that. Maybe don't even hit today. Go lift today. Feel better about yourself. There's a reason they got mirrors in weight rooms. You know, get in there and feel better about yourself. That's why Coach Anderson gives them sleeveless T-shirts, you know, to lift in. There's a reason you want to feel good. And he just he's a guy that if you made me right now bet, make it to the big leagues, and I wouldn't bet against that guy. I really, he's going to get an organization. The managers are going to love him. The coaches in those organizations will love him. His teammates will love him. And he's going to get a lot of opportunities just because you enjoy having him around. So I certainly would never bet against Josiah Seidler, nor Burgess, who's played 2 years ago with a completely torn labrum, caught with a sleeve on to not let his shoulder move. And then Bosnick, I still remember Bosnick throwing his first scrimmage against NC State when we were able to do those fall scrimmages. And unfortunately, that's also when he hurt his arm the first time. But I remember standing in the dugout going, holy cow, this guy looks like a Friday night guy, because I had not seen him in person till then. So if he's healthy, and I know he is, and he's like a fresh arm that's going to be in minor league baseball, because he really hasn't been able to pitch a lot in the last 2 years.
It's fascinating. As you talked about him, John Koutlangas popped in my mind, right? Yeah. Another lefty who ended up throwing in the big leagues. Was only exclusively an outfielder in his Gamecock career. Sometimes, I mean, Marcus McBeth, an outfielder in his Gamecock career, was in the same bullpen, I think, with the Reds for a little bit as a pitcher. Seidler was mentioned by Jim Callis, who follows all these prospects about the left-handed power bat, but also throws 91 to 94 on the mound as a possibility. We talked about guys with Merrifield playing the outfield and then the infield with Braylon Wimmer. Well, Seidler's done that too, right? Played first base, played the corner outfield, a little different than playing up the middle like Merrifield and Wimmer, but showing some versatility. And there are a lot of different ways to go there. As you were talking about that, man, are kids these days different to coach than when you started? You said 96, right?
Yeah, first year is 96.
So yeah. I guess, do you have to coach kids differently? Are they that different, or is it everything else around us that has changed more than kids have changed when you coach them?
Yeah, I still feel in a lot of ways they're the same, but you're way more aware now of your environment too. I mean, in a sense of, when I started back in 1996, I was a high school coach. I started my first year was at my school where my son's at now, in Mid Carolina. Then I went to Brooklyn Casey with Charlie Ass, who were able to win a state championship and had great players on our team. We had Kip Balknight, Stephen Whetstone, Russell Triplett, all those guys. And every practice started with them running a time mile in 1997. Now think about how many kids now will go, I can't do that. They had to go run a time mile. That was my job for Coach Assey, is go stand on track, make sure they run a mile. They got to run it in whatever it was, 10 minutes. It was just a mentality of, they want it. You could feel it different. That's where I'm scared sometimes with the transfer portal. It isn't always just that kid. What has changed, and I'm a parent of a high school player, the parents have changed. I remember coaching at Mid Carolina, Brooklyn Casey, and then getting over to South Carolina. Beside the fact of knowing their parents through certain events, they weren't involved. No one came and watched practice. They dropped their kids off, and when they got old enough to drive, they didn't come to practice. They came to games. We had, so that part has changed. It seems with Facebook and things that started years ago for older, people and parents, everybody needs to know everybody's business. Everybody wants to know everybody's, especially with college baseball. It seemed like everybody knew each other's scholarships. And that always blew me away, because I was raised to keep that stuff private. Let people think you maybe have more than you really even do, but until you tell them, So what I've seen change in my 25 plus years now is just the need to everybody to know everybody's business, and then everybody to have to feel like it's equal. I used to joke at Charleston Southern. We've all heard the Jimmy Johnson story, when he cut the linebacker who fell asleep in a team meeting, and, the press asked him, said, well, what if Troy Aikman had fallen asleep in that same team meeting? He said, I'd have walked back there and gently nudged him in the shoulder and said, Troy, wake up. He goes, because he had earned that. And what he was trying to say, it wasn't about this particular person. You have to earn it. And now people a lot of times don't realize you still have to earn it. You go back to Whit Merrifield and those, you just used the word earlier, sludged through his minor league career. I don't think any of us we all loved Witt and we all remember his hit, but I don't think any of us said, oh, yeah, that guy's going to get 1,000+ hits in the big leagues. No doubt about it. He kept going through his minor league career without saying, you owe me this, or, hey, do you realize I was a national champion? Because I knew guys in that organization said he just showed up every day, and that was, I've had an old scout that I really admire. He still picks on me that attendance is still a big part of the grade, because he'll go to see a player and that guy's not in the lineup, or he comes out of the game early and he goes, he didn't get a very good attendance grade from me. And that's still a big part of it. So I do still think guys want to be coached. I just coached the summer leagues. First time I've ever coached my son's age or his team. And a few of them at the end of the summer laughed and said, Coach, we've never had someone be so honest as you. And I had 2 assistants that helped me. Thank you. We've never had anybody. We've always had people tell us what we do wrong. We've never had anybody tell us what we do wrong and how to fix it on a baseball field. And that honesty came through when guys would come up to me and go, why am I not playing? Or you're not better than that guy. I mean, I'm not going to – that's why today I'm putting this guy's on the field. Or it might be a case of, hey, he's always here. He's always early. I feel good about him, and you're always late. Well, my parents can't get here. Well, then y'all need to probably figure out how to leave 30 minutes earlier from home. It's just, I love still being honest. And the cool thing for me, Tim, in my coaching career, I never tried to ever hurt someone with a comment. I think there are guys that probably enjoy knocking people down a notch. I was not a very good player. I was a player who, I joke in speeches I give, in my high school team, I would hit 8th or 9th. And I was lucky to hit 8th or 9th. I played with really good players. When I got into college, I think the highest I ever got in the batting order was 5th. I was just a guy that loved the game and found a way to stay in the game and have up to this point. So I don't feel the kids have changed. I just feel a lot of things around them have changed. And that's what we got to protect as adults, as parents, and as coaches.
Man, so much stuff from there. I want to give you a quick example on my end of it as well, because I come at it from similar standpoint, not even near the player that you were, just love the game, right? I mean, we're sitting here talking right now because we love baseball, we love sports, the whole thing. But now I'm coaching my kids, 9 and 7, and was coaching coach pitch with my older one, finally kind of nudged him to doing that, and he loves it now. And it was a postseason banquet for coaches. Another coach beside me said, yeah, one time I screwed up in a post-game speech. I told our team the other team was better than us, and a parent called me out for it and the whole thing, and I shouldn't have said that. And I said, what? You got beat. The other team was better, and there was a parent who took offense that you told the kids that? How was that wrong? Well, they said that, they weren't really better than us, but they play better. And they were sensitive about it. I was like, man, this is where we've come. This is where we're at, that parents can't stand for their kids to hear that they weren't as good as the other team when they lost a game. That is mind-boggling to me. And the guy's response as well, because mine would have been the exact opposite. Yeah. Said, hey, we need to have a conversation as adults about how we view the world. And if yours is different than mine, that's okay, but you need to know mine, right? Yeah. And this is it, and this is how I'm going to speak to your child. And if that's not going to work out for you, he might need to play on a different team. Yeah. Because there are very few things that get me fired up in life, Stuart, but that's one of them, man. When you see black and white and you're calling it purple, I got problems with that big time. Yeah. So that's an example. I think I'm with you about parents changing. I think maybe there have always been those type of parents, but they just haven't had the megaphone of social media, and then in their kids' ear, they haven't gotten that affirmation from other people as well. It's been at school, no, you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and now it's different than that. So that's a challenge that we all, I think, as parents, as volunteer coaches, whatever it is, we all got to battle these days. Yeah. And I'm thankful for a platform like this to let us kind of speak how we need to speak. Yeah. So that is a massive challenge for sure. And I just feel bad for the kids. right? This is reinforced. As you were talking about parents, it reminded me of Frank Martin's viral press conference comments, extended comments. This is years ago, where he went off about talking about how he deals with his kids playing for other coaches. And he says he goes and sits in the stands and tell them, you got an issue with your coach, take it up with your coach. You guys work it out. If things cross the line and get personal, like you mentioned, then that's when a parent should step in. But otherwise, I'm supporting your coach, and you guys have to work that out. Do you feel like that is the main dynamic there, and not enough parents go with that mindset? Or I don't know what you have to have that mindset, like security or trust or whatever it is. But to me, that seems to be the problem in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think it is. And I'm the same way with Hayden. I mean, we've been very lucky, with who coaches and do those type things. I mean, I've just told him, these are your coaches. I love just going and watching him play. This summer, I told you, it's the first time I'd ever been in the dugout really with any – I've gone in the dugout when he was young, and that kind of coach's pitch type stuff where the guy would say, hey, I need some more, cat herders in the dugout to help me keep those guys. But I wasn't in there giving hitting advice. And I got to do it a little bit last summer. And now this summer, it was a case where I could be, quote, the head coach. So as soon as I did, and the guy that runs the Diamond Devils laughed at me, I said, I need this guy. And I knew I wanted Coach Dwayne Kitts, who's an old scout, retired now, pitching guy, baseball guy. I said, I need him in the dugout with me because I need to have somebody I can bounce it off of. And I ended up getting another younger coach, B.J. McConnell. He came in, and it was fun this summer to have them around. But there's no doubt if you got a problem with your coach, go see him. And if what's the problem? What's causing it? Are you showing up late and I don't know about it? Are you not working hard enough at practice? Figure that out, because as you and I know, that's real life. I mean, you're going to have to do it. I always give you great stories. I give you one of my CSU stories. I first got there, and we would get guys come umpire in the fall, and the guy that did the umpires in Charleston would call me and go, hey, this guy's never done a game behind the plate at the college level. He knew I was a former umpire. So he'd say, hey, can I send guys to do your scrimmages and you evaluate them for me? Those guys won't know you're evaluating them. I need you to really evaluate them. So at times I would leave the playing field or walk up, sit in the stands, or even go in my press box and watch them. And this particular day, it was my first year there. I had a senior catcher who was a really good player. He embarrassed the umpire. This guy was really struggling. 40-year-old man. You could tell his first time he'd ever seen a guy throw 90. He was struggled. Well, I just had enough of my guy. So
what did he do? You got to tell us what he did. What did he do to
embarrass? It was on balls and strikes. The poor guy was just missing ball. He's calling balls strikes, ball. And my catcher was just being a jerk to him, just in his body language, saying stuff. So, boom, scrimmage over. I thank the guy for being there. He leaves. And my wife still picks on me because she was there that particular day. I unloaded on this particular guy in front of his teammates. And I mean, way over probably the line even for me. And as I get done, they all leave. Everybody leaves. Not a word said. I tell them don't even work on the field. Well, as I'm done, I noticed that guy who was umpiring had stayed kind of around the corner at my cages. And I'm like, oh, geez, what's this guy want now? So he comes walking up to me and my wife. She was probably holding Hayden. He was no more than 2 or 3 years old. And remember, I'm at Charleston Southern Baptist School. Well, he then introduces himself, and he's a youth minister at my vice president's church. And Tracy said it to herself. I said it, I think, out loud. Well, this is going to be the shortest tenured coach in the history of Charleston Southern with what I just said. And this made an impact on me that I've remembered forever. He goes, Coach, you probably could set it a little bit different way. But I'm calling Dr. Brewer to tell him he has absolutely hired the perfect guy for this job. Because in my 20-plus years of being around parents and youth, no one wants to hold anyone to a standard anymore. And what I just saw, and again, maybe we could clean the language up. I just saw you hold a young man to a level that he probably has never been held to. And he did. He called my vice president. My vice president called me that night and said, hey, he never compliments anyone. I don't know what you did. Then you spin that story 20-some years later, and that young guy thanks me about every 2 years, and he's had a tremendous professional career, not in baseball, but in life. And he said, Coach, I needed that. I had always been really good. Everybody had let me act however I wanted to act. I hit third. You know, I was the best player on the team, and you were the first guy to ever level me and say you're no better than anybody else on this team, and you're not going to treat people that way. And I cleaned up maybe how I gave that story out as my career went on, because there were a lot more of those come together meetings that I had with players. But I always remembered that moment of they needed it. And they needed me. I could have used better language, as the guy kept reminding me, still does when I see him. But it made a point and changed his life that we're the adults here. And he knew he was wrong. He just needed to be called out for it. And he went on to become the captain of that team. And his teammates respected him even more because he became a better dude to be around instead of a guy you didn't want to be around. So I think with what you're doing with your sons and what I get to do, I mean, it's been said. Billy Graham said it. We coaches and teachers touch more people in a lifetime than most people ever get to do. And I think that's a tremendous.
I think the line is in a year they touch more people than most people do in a lifetime, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's and I don't care if that means you're coaching T-ball or high school or college or whatever.
No, I definitely think maybe the younger you get, the more challenging it can be because you have more parents involvement in the whole thing. At least if, you're in certain spots for sure, man. There's so much to that. I guess my one specific question for you, Stuart, is what happened on the field that day that made you react specifically as strongly as you did?
Well, I was taught from the very beginning to respect in baseball. Respect the game. What that means when you're playing baseball is respect every part of the game. You respect the umpire, you respect your teammate, you respect your opponent, you respect the guy that drags and waters the field. I mean, I learned that early on. If you don't know Donnie Lindler's name and Justin Scurry's name, who takes care of the field at South Carolina, then why are they going to care about it as much? You know, that was something that I learned from my high school coaches. I learned it when I got with Coach Tanner. Really respect the game. And I'm still that way. When I see someone not respecting the game, bat flips to me are a disrespect to the game. It's hard to hit. It's hard to pitch. We don't need anyone showing the other one up. I don't like guys that strike guys out making notice of themselves. I like to respect the game. That day when he kept saying stuff or the way he was throwing the ball back, his body language to that guy trying to umpire that game, he was not respecting him, but he was not respecting our game. I was an umpire. I know how hard it is. I mean, I think I've been thrown out of 2 games my entire career. And the big reason is I know how hard it is. I don't just go out there arguing for the sake of arguing. I know how hard it is. Most of my arguments would turn into, hey, I just don't think you're in the right place to see that. Can you go get help? Not, you're awful. What are you doing? You keep missing calls. And so to me that day, he was not respecting the game. And if you respect the game, all parts of it, the game typically respects you as well.
Yeah, I think you can go further than that. And it's not just a baseball thing. It's a sports thing, or if you're in school, it's your teacher's thing. It's across the board. But yeah, to show kids specifically that, I mean, that again, why I will always speak to the virtue of team sports, just so they can see it on that level and maybe take it somewhere else, man. I think it's so important because it is a game. It should be fun, but you got to stay within the lines, right? There are parameters. You get outside those lines and you don't get called out for it, I think it has the exact opposite message that we want to send, right? Then team sports are doing the opposite thing that we want to do them. And that's when you got to make sure that I think as a parent, that you're making sure your kids are playing for the right people. And you said you got lucky with your son and the whole thing. I don't think that's luck in a lot of ways. I think that's knowing you got to set them up for success and put them in certain situations. Yeah. And you got to have a feel for that, I think, as a parent. And that's wildly important too, man, because it has such an impact.
Well, it does too. And I'm sitting here and it kind of just came to my mind as you and I talk. I assume in the future, maybe we'll start to see, NIL guys, do you get suspended and then a little fine? I mean, think about it. If you're going to be able to pay me, then why can't you fine me? So if I'm that guy that's getting $150,000 and say I get ejected from a game or I break a team rule, it's going to have to come down the line to at some point that money, okay, you owe $5,000 to whatever you donate the money to. So it's so many things are going to change with the way things are handled in the next few years. I'm excited to see how they do. I'm excited to see how this changes. If you start talking about you're going to give more opportunities for people to coach and more opportunities for guys to make money so that they're not in debt when they come out of college. I think about it. I loved my years of college baseball, but I was in debt coming out playing college baseball. My family had paid a lot of money for different things to allow us to do it. Maybe nowadays you'll see people getting to come out with not as much debt. So I'm all for trying to help things out.
The massive increase in college education in our country is a big problem for sure. As we were talking about this, it dawned on me, this has a through line to the captain, to the documentary series for Derek Jeter. The scene, I think it was in the second episode, there's a bloop to left field, short left field, and Jeter's going out, and outfielders coming in. It was a guy who didn't play very much in the outfield. They didn't communicate. The ball drops, and David Wells on the mound throws his arms up like that. And Jeter, I think, is 23 at the time, and he yells at him on the field, "We don't do that around here." And it got to Buster Olney, I think, who was a beat reporter at the time, that that Jeter had challenged to fight David Wells. And part of the issue with that was Jeter went to his third baseman, he went to his second baseman, he went to his first baseman and said, "Hey, who's putting this out there?" And it happened to be, he got it from, I think, an umpire, or it was a clubhouse guy that heard it from an umpire kind of thing. Yeah. So there's so much that goes into that, right? But what I'm taking away from the captain, I watched episode 3 and 4 last night, is Derek Jeter's mindset was so valuable in all of this. Like, he had to be super talented too. And I think that gets whitewashed a little bit, and that irks me. Like, to make his ridiculous jump throws, there are only certain humans that are gifted enough to do that. So that's a big part of this too. But then when you have a certain amount of humans who are equally physically talented, it's mindset is so important. And most recently, the difference in his team first mindset compared to Alex Rodriguez, I'm a superstar mindset, has been on display and has made me appreciate Jeter for that, and made me see like how unique he is, I think, and how hard that must be for guys who are so super talented to maintain that, how the unique circumstances, I think, of Jeter's upbringing and his background and the whole thing allowed him to stay true to that, where most guys, I think, get caught up in it a lot more than he did.
Yeah, it sticks out. I mean, he called Joe Torre Mr. T.
Right. Yeah, I keep hearing that too, man.
Yeah, in pro baseball, the hardest thing to me when I got into pro baseball is no one wants to – everybody's by their first name. So I grew up with Coach Livingston, Coach Tan. I still don't call anyone who's ever coached me by their first name. Well, then in pro baseball, it's like you're not cool if you don't call everybody Joe and Jim. Or
a nickname, right? Snit coaches the Braves, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, you got to him to be Mr. Torre, but the two things that jumped out between the captain and then Tom Brady's that you hardly see in any others, and there's a reason they talk about their parents all the time. The captain, his parents are in this thing every episode. If you go and look at the one they did on Tom Brady, he constantly talks about his family and his parents. So as parents, we got a huge responsibility to our kids here. And I'm with you too. You forget, he was a 6th overall pick. I would always stand up in front of those same kids and talk about those 5 tools. And then I would tell them there's a 6th tool, which at South Carolina, we always call it makeup, your ability, what the cyclers have. But I was very clear to those parents that were sitting in that stand going, then great, my kid is the nicest kid ever, so he's going to play at South Carolina. I would always tell them, no, you've got to have 1 or 2, maybe if you're lucky, 3 of these other 5 tools. You don't just get recruited to a school because, that Tim Hill's the nicest guy ever. I think we're going to play him at short this year. No, you're out there because you're super talented. Then on top of his talent, the guy super respects the game. I mean, you can just see it. I'm interested. How does it end up now, these next few episodes with the A-Rod? Obviously, we all know he's coming to the Yankees. So how does that – I'm kind of curious to see, how professional was he that he made it look smooth? Because now that we've got the backstory and kind of knew what was going on, that maybe in the 90s and all, we didn't know was going on with them because of it. But I've loved it. I mean, I know we got 3 more episodes. I want to just keep doing them, because I made Hayden sit down and watch them all. I was like, and when I say made him, I said, hey, watch this. And then he's, all right, let's watch the next one, because it is a part of game that they just don't hear a lot about today. I mean, so it's really cool to see what that show, I think, is going to do for a lot of people, but I hope it does for parents too.
You mentioned getting the compliment for being honest with kids. I feel like Jeter is being honest with all of us finally in a lot of ways. Like, we were thinking it was just the Mets in the Subway Series, just the Mets.
Yeah.
And we were thinking when we're playing the Red Sox, they're going to find a way to screw it up. Yeah. And these are things that you would never say as a player, right? And I forget, it was, I think one of the Mets specifically had said that they're going to win it in 5, and he said that really ticked him off. One of the Oakland A's, Eric Chavez, said that it was about their time to be done and somebody else needs to win, and how they were watching at the clubhouse, and that ticked them off. Jeter was smart enough to know what to say publicly, right? And clearly had his own thoughts behind the scenes that would drive him in the whole thing. And now, years later, to me, that's when we always get the real story in sports, if we ever get it all, right? If we ever get close to all of it, it has to be years removed where there's not going to have impact on wins and losses for these guys. And just him sitting there to the camera, matter-of-factly saying these things, we thought it was just the Mets. And then they had him even kind of off camera, like behind the scenes, getting some water, saying, I guess I'm going to hear something about that, right? Like, yeah, he knows it's coming, and he knew that he couldn't say that then, but he knows he can say it now. And to hear that real stuff, or close to the real stuff, is why I like series like this. And to me, the value of something like this, that you can teach your son and show them, hey, one of the best that ever did it. And Alex Rodriguez didn't think anything by saying, he never had to hit third. He hadn't had to lead. He's always been the other guy. And then for Jeter to hear that and say, hey, man, I thought we were buddies. I wouldn't do that to you. Yep. And you're done now. You're out of the circle. We are not the same that we were, and I'll be cordial and professional in the whole thing. And you want to come play with us? All right, you're playing third base. Great. You're gonna help us win, because that's the whole point. But guess what? You're not in there anymore. Man, it's fascinating in so many ways. I'm loving it as well.
Yeah, I am too. I think the episodes seem they come on Thursday, so we're always checking. Wish we had the old TV guide still, where I could just flip through and really see when it's coming on. But we're scanning over the other day to see when the new ones are, and it is. And I'm curious how they'll let us know. But it tells you a lot about A-Rod. He knew he wasn't better to say, hey, I'll play third. As Jeter said in that, he goes, there's no way I'd have done that. He said, there's no way I was ever going to leave shortstop. And to just think I'll go do it but A-Rod wanted to win a championship, I'm sure, is what it's going to eventually be said.
Right.
And that was what I thought was my best chance to do it. But it was just it was kind of cool as they show the last game of Jeter. I forgot that Brett Gardner was even on those teams. I saw him in the background yesterday, and I texted him that, hey, I'm going to have to hear some Jeter stories now, because the one thing also about his teammates, they don't talk about it. I don't know what he did or who he's got as his enforcers. You never hear stories about him.
Well,
You know,
to me, it's obvious, man. It's what he said. He's like, I wouldn't say that about my friend. So if you say that about me, you're gone. You're dead to him, right? And it was clear that they knew it. A great example is one I watched last night. Chad Curtis had an issue, right? He got hit, and there was a brawl with the Mariners. And at the end of that brawl, it's Jeter and A-Rod kind of messing with each other. And A-Rod was joking, next time I'm going to come after you. And Curtis in the dugout, you can see him going back and forth saying, what are you doing, man? Why didn't you have my back, kind of thing? Jeter's like, that's not how it went down, man. And then after the game, he says very clearly, there is a time, a basic cooling off period after a game in the big leagues where there's no media in the clubhouse, and that's when you air your stuff out if you got a problem with players. And Curtis waited until Jeter was talking to reporters and came by and then made it a scene. And and that was really interesting. I think Buster Olney was there, and he said he saw Jeter kind of processing it, right? He saw him. He was ticked off and not okay with what was happening, and yet still didn't react because he's Derek Jeter. He knows you don't do that, right?
Yeah.
And then it was no more Chad Curtis with the New York Yankees. And Jeter still to this day is like, well, if I had that power, I would have given myself an extension and the whole thing. He had that power. And that is exactly why Curtis did not play for the Yankees anymore. And that's exactly why you're not hearing any Derek Jeter stories even yet. You might have to wait until Brett Gardner's about 75 years old, I think, Stuart, to hear the real stories with Derek Jeter, that anything that would paint him in a bad light, I feel like.
No, I agree. And one that kind of went quickly through it too, being named captain when he and Mr. Steinbrenner were arguing. Right. I mean, they were at a time where really most people knew George Steinbrenner just fired you. I mean, that was usually the next step in that. And for George Steinbrenner to go, no, instead of firing you, I'm actually going to name you a captain. It just says so much. And I felt like at times so far, that wasn't even made as big a deal as to me that is. Right. I mean, you start talking about that organization. Was he the 11th captain? There hasn't been any since him, right?
I don't think so. If there has, it would be kind of ridiculous, I think, to even think about who it would be. What before him, it was Willie Randolph and Don Mattingly. I think the most recent guys that I knew in baseball, Lou Gehrig was brought up as, a classic example. But what that is, what you just talked about, was what you were talking about with the Jimmy Johnson story, right?
Yeah.
George Steinbrenner doesn't do that for anybody else.
No.
But Derek Jeter was a huge part of winning championships.
Yes.
That got him that respect, right? And that's the thing too, man. You have to back that up and know where you stand in life, right? And especially in sports, and the winning trumps everything. That's really what I'm taking away from Jeter. That's what I took away from the Michael Jordan, the Last Dance thing, man. It is about winning. There is a cost, and those guys. And what I'm also getting from this that I think needs to be talked about, Stuart, as well, is there's a part of me that feels for these guys as human beings that they have a different type of burden and struggle than most of us regular people. Yeah. And you've talked about it before, how Ray Tanner would react to losses and take them so hard, and you guys would be at the office for so long. And I feel like it's similar to what I'm hearing with Derek Jeter when they lost the World Series. I think the first time to the Diamondbacks, maybe, and he's stewing, and he's all off season. He can't sleep. He says his friends are saying he's moody, and the whole thing. Like, it's got to be in some ways a difficult way to go through life as well, kind of never being satisfied. It's great as a competitor, right? And I've heard this about Jerry West as well. Like, he wouldn't talk to his wife for a couple of weeks sometimes. Yeah. Like, that's not a healthy way to go through life, man. But when you have that certain mindset that drives you to the highest of heights, that's what you got to have to get there. But in other parts of life, that's got to be a bit of a burden.
Yeah, I don't know if you've read, and I know now we're kind of, and I hate to see it, Tony La Russa is kind of a butt of jokes now. You saw it yesterday, and it looked like I've dozed off in dugouts before. It's a lot of long games. It was just happened to be the first inning, I guess. But if you remember reading his book, when he left Oakland to go be the Cardinals manager, he was so bad at losing. His wife asked him to just get a hotel during the season and only come home for games, or only come home when you can come home and we can enjoy you. And I remember reading that 15 years ago going, wow. I mean, he would say in it, and he goes, I regret it now because I miss a lot of my children's lives. I would just stay in my hotel room that was my home at the time because I knew if I went home, I was going to be miserable. And I've done it myself as a coach. I think any of us that really care, immediately you're thinking of the next game. You're thinking of what could I have done in that game. And it is, and never at maybe the level of the Jeters and as we see Michael Jordan, but it is special for those guys. And that's the thing I try to always say to my son is, but understand you only got so long to do this. Because a lot of people say, I don't make them do this all the time. Well, I wasn't raised that way. I knew I didn't have long to play. Typically, all of us that love sports are done playing by 21. I mean, if you think about it, if you're lucky, only they say like 7% of high school guys even go to play college. So most people are done at 18. So I always wanted to enjoy it. My parents let me enjoy that part and make that my job until I was done playing. Then you got to figure out what is your job. And, that's what you have to do. But these guys you can learn a lot from these guys if you'll pay attention. These type documentaries on Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, and now with Derek Jeter. Holy cow, we could teach a college class on this. And I don't think we could do it in one semester.
Yeah, the main problem is that I keep having to watch the Yankees win, and especially against the Braves. And it brings up the old stuff. And it reminds me, now I remember why I hate the Yankees. Every single year they're in the World Series with Jeter. And, I feel so bad you lost 1 or 2 World Series. Get out of here. I was big Diamondback and Marlins fans last night. Those guys to beat them. Hey, man, I really appreciate the time, as always, this morning. Great stuff, and especially the baseball-specific stuff with guys signing, now the NIL factors, and then just hearing your thoughts about coaching your son and watching the captain, all that stuff. Really appreciate it, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Definitely will. I got a little recommendation of the terminal list, so we got 2 episodes in last night.
Oh, you did?
So, so I got 2 in. I'm excited to kind of continue. I think I got 6 more, and then maybe one day we can talk about it on the show.
That sounds great. So that's always a good sign. If I recommend something and you've watched more than 1 episode and near immediate, that means you've taken to it well. You got an early thumbs up. Is that what you're saying? An
early thumbs up. My wife was mad. She wanted to watch more last night, but I said, no, 2's enough.
Nice.
Let's split them up. Let's not just throw them all in. And
I'm always that guy. I'm always that person in the relationship. I'm always like looking over there, like, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep watching, right? And my wife's always like, nope, we gotta go to bed. We gotta call it.
Yeah,
that makes sense, man. Stu, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. That is at Stuart_Lake, where you can follow Stuart on Twitter. Former Gamecock assistant coach, Charleston Southern head coach, Ole Miss assistant, College of Charleston assistant coach. A wealth of experience when it comes to baseball for sure. The situation college baseball coaches find themselves in now, just fascinating to me, especially at the SEC level, where I didn't think name, image, and likeness was going to be a factor in baseball at all, really. I mean, a really minor factor, and probably looking at the big picture in college sports, it still is a very minor deal. But to see what LSU's doing, to see these 3 Gamecocks getting drafted, all deciding to come back to Carolina. I know they haven't come out and said, yes, name, image, and likeness money, and we're getting this amount and the whole thing. But just trying to connect the dots from the outside, I got to think it has played some factor. And I got to think college baseball coaches might be looking around and saying, hey, this is actually a really good thing for us, for our game, to compete with those pro prospects, those guys who get drafted, and say, nope, we can figure it out to this dollar amount for at least a year for you to come back. And maybe that will get you an improved spot in pro ball, and you'll be able to cash in even more so. It was cashing in yesterday for Austin Riley in the Atlanta Braves, 10 years, $212 million deal. Man, as a Braves guy, again, watching the captain is so difficult to go back and see. Got swept in the 99 World Series. It popped up and I was like, I don't even really remember details about this. And now I remember why. I just put it out of my memory, right? Uncompetitive. Just whooped. It was a couple of years before where they beat the Braves the first time, and there's Maddox and Smoltz and Glavine, and nope, couldn't do it. Oh, just brutal. But I got to put that aside and watching it. I'm really watching this thing out of respect, right? And then kind of researching, trying to figure out or to come to a fuller picture of how Derek Jeter approached things and went about it and what I can take from that. And there's a ton there. So even you fellow Braves fans out there, I would recommend watching the captain if you love baseball and if you can stomach. Maybe you fast forward through those parts because they are hard to watch. And then, I mean, the Subway Series was going on, and the love from New York is there. And I have to equate some of that Yankees hate to just the city of New York and the culture and the whole thing. But I've tried to get past that. I've tried. And Austin Riley signing for 10 years and $212 million yesterday, seeing that he, Acuna, all these, I mean, go down the list. Who else is signed up? Matt Olson for the next 5 years. These guys are good. I think maybe Contreras as well. I mean, the Braves are sitting in great shape, and they're almost sitting that core four. You're never going to get it like the Yankees did it with Jeter. Was it Andy Pettit, Bernie Williams, and Tino Martinez, I think, are the core four, or Mariano Rivera, I think, is in there as well. Maybe he's in there instead of Tino, or I forget, or maybe Bernie. I don't know. They were all they seem to always be there and always be winning the World Series, beating the Braves a couple of times on their way. So the bitterness is still there. Maybe that clouds the memory a little bit. I try to forget it with the selective memory. But all that is still there. But to set up your organization for sustained success moving forward, to be able to create a culture with the right kind of guys and different type of personalities too. Like the Derek Jeter personality was obviously kind of driving this thing, or at least that's, how the captain portrays it. And I mean, he was named the captain, right? It wasn't Bernie Williams or Mariano Rivera, but you had to have other types of personalities in there, and the mix had to be right. And they talked about that, how after I think it was the first losing World Series, how the George Steinbrenner kind of came in there and said, "Nope, we're plucking guys. We're getting Jeremy Giambi or Jason Giambi from the A's, bringing him in and getting free agents in," and how it was kind of a mixed bag of personalities that didn't quite work. Well, you want to have your guys and then have some ability to put in pieces around them. Like the Braves are getting an outfielder and a reliever. I think today's trade deadline's at 6:00, so they're adding pieces to try to make a postseason run. 5th best record in the majors. You set yourself up to, like Ray Tanner always said, you want to set your program up in college baseball to give yourself a chance in the postseason. And by that, to give yourself the best chance means you have a regular season where you can host postseason games. And again, that will always be the standard for Gamecock baseball, and why Mark Kingston and his program have a lot to prove going into this season for sure. And having these 3 guys coming back to Carolina in James Hicks, Noah Hall as pitchers, Braylon Wimmer as a really talented player, kind of all over the field, and a 5-tool potential type guy. Man, that is a huge boost for Gamecock baseball, the news from yesterday. But you got to put yourself in position, and that's, I think, how you're evaluated more than an isolated run. Like Gamecock basketball not putting themselves in position to go to the postseason. That's ultimately why Frank Martin's not the coach anymore. The Final Four run was fantastic, but that was your only postseason. That was the only success in the postseason. You got to get yourself there, and that's again where my respect to really, really good programs consistently, like Nick Saban winning a national championship is one thing at LSU, but then doing it year after year after year, what Dabo Swinney and Clemson have done year after year after year, except last year. That's why, again, that was a bit of a head scratcher. And how do they bounce back, man? That's why all the pressure to me is on DJU this year. Haven't even touched on it today, and we'll probably save this for another day. But you guys check this out if you get a chance today. I recommend it highly, and we'll probably talk about this, if not tomorrow, so certainly sometime in the near future. But there's an article from Dennis Dodd, who covers college football for CBSSports.com. Fascinating. And there is a group out there that is kind of leading the way. That there was a Zoom call that this group, Big League Advantage, is the name of this company, and it's in the name, image, and likeness space, right? But it is approaching it almost like a hedge fund, and I never realized this, and my dad let me in on this. He's been the member of a country club for a long, long time, and they've had, I guess, different players, but especially one who was a really good amateur, made a run professional golf, but asked those in their club to invest to help with the financial burden that professional golfers face just from traveling, just from going from tournament to tournament. I mean, you think about it. I never even thought about it before. Like, I guess I kind of assumed that maybe the specific tours would arrange accommodations for their players. That's not how it works, right? John Daly famously kind of drove and was staying in his RV, I think, when he was an alternate for that PGA championship that he won, when he was the 7th alternate back in the day. But no, you're responsible for, and that's part of the reason why I have been as open-minded about this LIV Series thing as I have, knowing that a guy like Kyle Thompson, I follow him on Twitter, former Gamecock golfer, he got his PGA Tour card for a little while, won several events on that tour that's right below the PGA Tour. It's the Korn Ferry now. It's been the Nike, the Hooters Tour, I think, the whole thing. But seeing some of his comments throughout this whole thing, how you have to sign up when you go to Q School, you have to agree that if you win, if you earn a PGA Tour, if you earn PGA Tour status, you have to agree that you can also fulfill the minimum amount of tournaments played required and the financial part of that burden, right? Basically, that you can travel, that you can put yourself up, and you're talking about just real money, reality, that costs money. So this has been a thing. They mentioned it even in this article that investors have been part of pro golfers for a while, that you invest and you say, all right, you put up X amount of dollars, you're going to get X percentage of winnings moving forward. You basically have stock in a pro golfer. Boxers have done this for a long time. This has never been done, though, in team sports, and now it is. This one name, image, and likeness deal, they got college players in the SEC. I mentioned one from LSU. The story that Dennis Dodd wrote from CBSSports.com yesterday centers around a Georgia linebacker who's being presented with this opportunity. He and his dad were on this Zoom call and said, hey, man, this is your money. You don't have to pay it back. You decide to go be a doctor, your money. But you become an NFL player, the percentage is going to be ours. And he mentioned that Fernando Tatis Jr. is one of the clients there. And they wouldn't reveal the financial stake in it, but when hundreds of millions of dollars have been signed for, and if you get even less than 10% of that, you're still making a massive amount of money. It seems to be part of the future. You're kind of prospecting athletes. It's a crazy mindset that I never even considered would be reality or even a hypothetical reality, but it is happening now. And it's happening. You will see Gamecock football players, which I assume some of them have already been approached here. I think it was mentioned like 23 guys, 23 offers are out there in college football. Wouldn't be surprised if Spencer Rattler was one of those guys or someone else on the South Carolina roster currently, but certainly there are guys already participating in this in the SEC and that have offers out there as well. Fascinating. That goes into the latest headline as well, mentioned the LIV Series. $700 to $800 million is what Greg Norman said. And Meredith confirming here, Meredith Taylor. Yep, mini tour is brutal on the ladies' side. Yeah, it's probably even more brutal, right? Because the purses aren't even as high for the women as they are for the men. And yet you don't get a discounted female rate at hotels. They don't have a different gas pump for you to get there, right? Or a different airplane ticket rate. $700 to $800 million. what Tiger Woods turned down to join the LIV Series. Whew. We mentioned this with the Dustin Johnson news, right? 125, I think was the figure, or 150 million at the time. Man, that was a lot larger than I thought it would be. Even knowing that this is Saudi Arabian backed finance, they got so much money, a ridiculous amount of money. Even when I knew it was a ridiculous amount of money, I would never have thought it was not too far from $1 billion that they could offer Tiger Woods. Now, Tiger clearly plays at he is an extreme all to his own. It makes me wonder what Phil Mickelson ended up signing for. If Dustin, again, it's always Tiger, Phil, everybody else kind of led by Dustin Johnson and company. So, and I'm using, if you're listening to this, using my hand to go at the top of the totem pole with Tiger, then not too far below him is Phil, and then dropping another pretty significant margin is kind of everybody else in the PGA Tour. I guess you got to probably put Rory McIlroy somewhere close to Phil these days. Justin Thomas maybe a little bit above everybody, maybe right in that group with Dustin Johnson. But I feel like Rory, Dustin, Justin Thomas, all kind of in the same group, leading the way for everybody else. Tiger, Phil, everybody else. You guys are going to have to win some more stuff. You're going to have to win more majors consistently to separate yourself, in my mind anyway. But $700 million. I mean, this brings up, Stuart and I hopped up on our soapboxes and talking about respecting the game and how important it is to teach kids the virtues and the whole thing. I guess this is where I should say good for Tiger Woods for not being bought here. But the very practical side of my brain says, how does anybody, I mean, we talked about it with Jack Nicklaus being offered $100 million to be the face of it, right? And knowing his ties with the PGA Tour, I get it. He and Arnold Palmer really established the PGA Tour, kind of founded it, the whole thing. And he's later on in life, and he's made plenty of money. So I get him turning it down. $700 million. I mean, the only place my brain can go to realistically here is John Rahm saying that even if we got offered, I forget what he mentioned in his press conference probably about a month ago. He said, I talked it over with my wife, and even if we got offered $150 million, would our lifestyle really change and the whole thing? Obviously, Tiger Woods has plenty of money. I think he might have been the first to hit $1 billion from a net worth from an athlete standpoint. But 700 to 800 million. It almost shows me more about the LIV Series part of this than it does about Tiger, because again, when you get to a certain point financially, turning down a whole lot of money isn't what it is for the rest of us, right? How would that have really changed Tiger's lifestyle? Probably not. I mean, it just changes the decimal point or the zeros, and when you get to a certain point, I would think his family's going to be fine for forever. It's nearly impossible to squander the money. He's obviously had personal challenges that came along with this that haven't been able to be avoided no matter how much money you make. But 700 to 800 million. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that. That you could be in a place financially to offer someone that, like, how much money is there out there? And then how do other guys read that have joined the LIV Series? Like, man, how do you not try to compare yourself, right? If you're Pat Perez, who made the move for, I don't know, if Pat Perez got $10 million, I think they probably overpaid for him, his value as a golfer, right? But then to put that compared to 700 to 800, like, he's got to be thinking to himself, calling his agent, like, we should have gotten more, man. They clearly got more. They're throwing it around. Holy. I don't know if this is a sign that I should think that the LIV Series is going to be a thing for longer because clearly they got the money, or that they were wanting Tiger Woods so much that they're willing to find money like that. I don't know how to even react to that. It's just so unfathomable. Both that there's someone to offer that amount of money out there just for golf, just because we want to be a golf thing. We want to be a world player on the golf stage. Apparently, they've come up with this entire philosophy that doing that would somehow help the Saudi Arabian perception of them and be seen as not how they're seen with the record with human dignity, or however you put that, right? You go into the political side of things. To me, in my head, that is still extremely insulting to sports fans. Like, I can't separate the two. Like, I can't see that guys who are funding a golf tour aren't also doing a bunch of shady stuff with their money. Like, I just kind of assume that naturally when you get to a certain level, that if you have millions of dollars to throw around, hundreds of millions of dollars, that you got that in a way that probably kept people from having money, right? And that's just the nature of capitalism these days, or our world. But 700, 800 million, man. I'm glad we didn't talk about that too much today, because it is such a mind-blowing number. I don't even know how to put words together to give you any kind of perspective on that thing. Much more comfortable talking about three guys who turned down a much smaller offer to go play professional baseball. Again, Josiah Seitler drafted in the 15th round, offered $125,000. James Hicks also drafted right around there in the 15th round as a pitcher coming off an injury. Not sure what his number would have been, but I would guess probably somewhere around there. I'm guessing Julian Bosnick. I haven't seen his number with the Pirates, but I'm guessing somewhere around there as well. Maybe a little bit more, since he's a left-handed kind of power arm, but he's also has dealt with injury issues and was set to go play at Texas A&M and transfer. So I don't know, but again, I love college baseball being that much more competitive and having as many talented guys in it as possible. So from that standpoint, I'm all for guys coming back to school. Gamecock baseball needs as many talented players as possible to get the program back to anywhere close to what it was. So 3 guys coming back out of the 4 who were drafted. I think excellent news for Mark Kingston, who has needed some excellent news for sure, especially when you're comparing him to what LSU has gone out and done in the transfer portal, other programs that Stuart Lake mentioned in the SEC, and now the name, image, and likeness opportunities that those programs are presenting, that he's hearing kind of the word in the baseball world. The Colin Burgess thing kind of going the opposite. Decided to put his name in the transfer portal, didn't get drafted, still signing a free agent deal with the Detroit Tigers. This goes back to the love of the game type deal. You can guarantee that professional deal wasn't lucrative for Colin Burgess moving forward. He's going to, if he ascends the ranks in the Tigers minor league system, it is going to be all earned. And for those of us who've watched him play the last several years, and especially defensively, kind of marveled at what he's been able to do. Wishing him luck for sure. And again, if you haven't checked out The Captain, the Derek Jeter documentary series, recommend it highly. And been able to DVR the episodes on ESPN. I know they have them on demand on ESPN Plus if you do that streaming service. So not hard to find, and been through 4 episodes. If you can get over, if you're a Yankee hater like me, if you can get past that part, if you can stomach all the celebrating and the beating the Braves and the whole thing, which I think moderately been able to do. But again, just appreciate, I guess, the perspective of Jeter on so many things, and kind of like the brutal honesty and the simplifying things. Like, it's very simple. A-Rod did that. He understands how he could have said that and come to that conclusion, but Jeter's takeaway is I wouldn't have done that to my friends. And once you do that, we don't have the same relationship anymore. And he admits, like, I got trust issues, and it comes a lot with how he grew up and being the parents, or being his parents being biracial and being the child of, I mean, he said in the episode I watched last night that one of his high school buddies said kind of years later, put out on Facebook or something, that he was uncomfortable with interracial marriages. And Jeter was like, and this guy was my buddy. I thought we were friends. And so part of the trust factor, the trust issues that Jeter admits that he has problems with. Fascinating stuff, man. And to me, that's where we are in 2022, to be able to get more honest stuff. That's why I do this show every day. Streaming 8 to 10. Shameless promotion here. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, the video version, the podcast version, the audio live version, always on Podbean from 8 to 10 if you just want audio only. But and then from there, Podbean helps me put it out all over the place from a podcast platform standpoint. However you watch, consume this show, it is greatly appreciated. Please know that. Needed to end by telling you one of our proud sponsors on the program is Freedom Primary Care, and it's who I trust to care for my family. They went yesterday, actually, my oldest with an ear issue. We tried to take care of it at the house and give the drops and the whole thing, and it just got to the point where it wasn't getting better quickly enough. We're heading to the beach this Friday. We will not have a show, by the way. One last beach trip, helping to celebrate my sister's 40th birthday right before school will start in a couple of weeks and the whole thing. So my wife wanted to get a handle on the ear issue for my oldest, and again, made me really appreciate Freedom Primary Care, their entire approach to health. They allow you choices, for sure. More natural-minded, trying to help your body heal the whole problem as opposed to slap a Band-Aid on it, but can give you the more traditional-minded approach as well. So we had tried the over-the-counter stuff that hadn't worked. They suggested another natural approach, and it has already helped my oldest to get past this ear thing, and we didn't have to go the further route with any kind of prescription drugs. That's what we would prefer at my house. If that sounds about like your approach, check out Freedom Primary Care. They're up in Fort Mill, South Carolina, but they have plenty of telemedicine options as well. You can give them a call, 803-627-2447. Really appreciate you supporting this show. Appreciate Freedom Primary Care supporting it as well. I think I got an exciting announcement about more support coming from the show soon. But anything you can do, like comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff, tell your friends. It is greatly appreciated. And just being a part of the show is a great support as well, like Anthony does every single day, getting out with a great job, Tim, and a fist up. And DC weighing in with a piece, was the first to weigh in and one of the last. Thank you guys so much. That'll wrap it up for the August 2nd edition on 2022 of the year and stuff of Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent. See you guys tomorrow.